Good morning, everyone in the room and online. This is the Planning Commission meeting of February 5th, 2025. Is that okay? We begin our agenda with a salute to the flag, if you'll join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us on our agenda to the TV coverage announcement and roll call. Mr. Villalobos?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, San Ynez Valley, Samaria, and Orchid areas. And Lompoc as well. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings will be on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website as well as the county's YouTube channel and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to roll call, Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
I'm here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And Chair Bridley.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. The agenda status report, Secretary Wilson?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. In regards to the status of our agenda, I'll mention it again when we get to that point, but Director Plowman is out of the office today, so we will move the director's report to next Wednesday when she can be back, and she will report on the board hearing as that occurred yesterday. But she has the details, and she wanted to pass that information on. In regards to items on our standard agenda, we have the appeal of the G&K Farms K&J Flower Cannabis Processing Structure design review, and then we had continued from last week the ordinance amendments for emergency shelters, art tours, and the home occupation zoning ordinance. And as we had talked briefly last week, and then we'll get more into it when we actually get to that item, we'll be separating out some of those items today and moving the emergency shelter, either remove it from the agenda or reschedule it for another date. And then we'll pick up the art tours and home occupations today.
I understand. Are there questions of the commission? Commissioner Cooney? No. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we proceed to our public comment, which is, actually the projection report. You want to continue?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Looking at the projection report, our next hearing will be next week in Santa Maria. We have 3 items on that agenda, which is we had continued the appeal of the Sentinel Peak Resources truck rack project to that date. There is on the consent calendar a government code consistency, and then as well as Keysite 2, which is a project which is the ambulatory surgery center. And that will be next Wednesday in Santa Maria. Looking down into February, February 19th, we had set a special hearing last week to bring back the cannabis ordinance amendments, which will include additional direction from the board. That'll be back here in Santa Barbara on the February 19th. And then on February 26th, we will again be here in Santa Barbara, and we have 2 items, a development plan for a housing project in the Goleta area, and then we have the annual comprehensive plan annual progress report on that date as well. As of now, we have nothing projected for March 5th, and then March 12th, we're in
Santa Maria?
Santa Maria, but I see Mr. Seward's here, but he may clarify that. It looks like the same project is on March 12th.
Good morning, Commissioners. So yeah, last minute memo went out yesterday.
Oh.
The Keysite 2 Surgery Center needed just a little more time to finalize a few details on their end. So I think
Was it
last
noticed
night
already?
sent out an email or a memo. So it's bumped to the 12th. Yeah, sorry about that.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, just clarification, being that was noticed, we'll have to pick that up on next week to actually formally continue it. So it looks like we'll hear it on March 12th. And then there's nothing else projected until April 9th, which we have a couple items on there. A Tier 2 winery, and then an equestrian facility, and that in April 9th is in Santa Maria.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the
Any-
projection report.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none. All right, thank
I have a
you.
question.
Commissioner Park?
Yes. It- Is the paper agenda projection report we get, is that part of the public record for these hearings? The reason I'm asking this is I get questions frequently from media, from constituents about our report and what's on it. And I know that if you try to get the Board of Supervisors projection report ahead of time, good luck. I don't know if you'd call it confidential, but it's a concern. I think that Mr. Villalobos will provide it to people on request for us. So the question is, can I provide it to people after the hearing if they ask for it? Or am I violating a policy or being a bad boy in some way?
So we're referring to the Planning Commission projection report?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have a distribution list that people can get on. I send it out every week. So I have quite a long list of people who receive it every week. So they just need to reach out to me. You can give them one for today, but it's always being updated, particularly right after each hearing. We get a lot of updates. So if anyone's interested in getting on the list, you just have to let me know. I can put you on the distribution list.
I admire your practice.
Thank you. And I've had a lot of questions like that too, and I just suggest that they talk to Mr. Villalobos and get on that list, and then they're as contemporary as we are.
And Madam Chair and Commissioner Park, just a disclaimer on that, as Mr. Villalobos indicated, that it is draft, and so things change frequently. So this is just to provide a tentative overview of what's coming. Things could move, drop off, change, and so that's our disclaimer to the public, that if you're looking at a projection report, it's not in stone, it's fluid. And so once it is noticed, then it's more solid.
Good reminder. Okay, thank you. That now brings us to a portion of our agenda where we offer public comment to anyone online or in the room that wants to address the commission for items not otherwise agendized today. Do we have any requests to speak? And can I get the speaker slips from the end of the dais for the item coming up?
And for those joining us online, if you'd like to speak at this time for this portion of the agenda, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll call on you.
Okay.
Not seeing any hands.
All right. Okay, then Planning Commissioner's informational reports. Do we have anyone on the commission that wants to make one? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 8. And that is the director's report, which is getting postponed to next week because we don't have our director in this room. Wow, here we are on the standard agenda. All right, let's read that into the record for item 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Jill Casinos, appellant to consider, case number 24 APL 24, to consider the appeal of the South Board of Architectural Review's preliminary design review approval of case number 19 BAR 225, as well as State CEQA Guidelines Section 15164 C4 checklist for commercial cannabis land use entitlement and licensing applications.
Thank you. And it is the point where we ask if commissioners have any ex parte communications that they'd like to make at this time. Seeing none, I just have one that I spoke to the applicant's representative, Jay Higgins, about a couple details on landscaping and timing, and also Ms. Tasinos this morning. Okay, so with that, we begin with our staff presentation. Ms. Brown?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Willow Brown, and I will be presenting the Stasenos appeal of the South Board of Architectural Review approval of the G&K processing structure. The 14.66-acre subject property is zoned Ag 110 and is located at 3561 Foothill Road in the Toro Canyon Plan area, 1st Supervisorial District. The property is currently developed with greenhouses for cannabis cultivation. The property is within the Carpinteria agricultural overlay and is surrounded by agricultural development. The project is a request for design review of an approved 25,000 square foot cannabis processing building. The building will be steel with aluminum window frames, steel doors, and a corrugated steel roof. It will be painted cypress green with sand-colored trim. There are 3 levels of review and approval that a project goes through in the design review process. The project is first reviewed conceptually, where the BAR looks at site planning, general architectural style, and the relationship of the project to the site and surrounding neighborhood. There is no action taken during conceptual review. After conceptual review, a discretionary project goes to the decision maker for action to be taken on the land use entitlements. Once it receives approval, it returns to BAR for preliminary review. Preliminary review is the formal review of a project prior to the preparation of working drawings. At this stage, a project's appearance, landscaping, and site and building orientation must be found consistent with the BAR's findings and guidelines to receive approval. If the preliminary approval by the BAR is appealed, the Planning Commission acts as the BAR on the appeal. After a project receives preliminary approval, it must return to the BAR for final review with complete working drawings. The final plan should be in substantial conformance with the plans that were given preliminary approval. A coastal development permit for the cultivation of cannabis in 5 existing greenhouses on site was approved in August 2019. In December 2019, applications for land use entitlements and design review for the cannabis processing structure were submitted. The project's design was conceptually reviewed by the SBAR in January 2020, and the project was directed to return for preliminary and final approval after action was taken on the land use entitlements. The land use entitlements for the processing structure were approved in November 2020 by the zoning administrator. Between November 2020 and March 2022, the project was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors and subsequently appealed. The project was appealed to the Coastal Commission, and they found no substantial issue in August 2023. The project went back to the SBAR for preliminary approval on September 20th, 2024, and was subsequently appealed to the Planning Commission. Therefore, the Planning Commission will be acting as the BAR on this design review appeal. The first appeal issue is that the processing building is too tall, too large when combined with the square footage of surrounding cannabis buildings, and will result in too dense of a concentration of cannabis structures in a small area. The project meets all ordinance requirements. It is consistent with all lot coverage and density requirements. The processing structure is 25,000 square feet, which will result in a total lot coverage of 62.8% when combined with the existing greenhouse development on site, which is less than the maximum allowance of 65%. The project is consistent with the density of other agricultural parcels in the vicinity. It is for an agricultural use on a parcel zoned for agriculture and will be surrounded by similar development. The processing structure is consistent with all height requirements. The maximum height of the processing structure from the finished floor is 21 feet, 4.5 inches. The site slopes downward from Foothill Road, and the maximum height of the building from the existing grade is approximately 24 feet, 4.75 inches. The height limit in the Ag 1 zone is 35 feet, and the height limit in the Carpinteria Agricultural Overlay is 30 feet. And so the maximum height of the processing structure will be well under the height limit. The second appeal issue is that public views from Villa Real and Foothill Road will be negatively impacted due to the size of the processing building and inadequate screening from adjacent roads. The processing building will not be visible from Villa Real or Foothill Road. The buildings will be located in the rear of the parcel and will not be visible past existing greenhouses. The processing building will be located approximately 750 feet from Foothill Road, 650 feet from Villa Real, and 1,700 feet from the Highway 101 overpass. Additionally, the front property line along Foothill Road is at an elevation of approximately 47 feet, and the finished floor at the front of the proposed processing building is 27 feet, meaning there is approximately a 20-foot drop in elevation from Foothill Road to the processing building. As shown on the previous slide, the processing building will have a maximum height of approximately 21 feet, 4.5 inches from the approved finished grade. The top of the processing building will be less than 2 feet above the street level at Foothill Road, as shown on the elevations. This slide shows the location of the project with respect to Foothill Road and Villa Real. As stated previously, the project is located approximately 750 feet from Foothill Road and 650 feet from Villa Real and will not be visible past the existing greenhouses on site and on neighboring properties and existing vegetation. The third appeal issue is that the project will cause increased traffic. Traffic issues are unrelated to the design review of the project, and traffic impacts were analyzed under the land use entitlements for the processing building that were already approved. The fourth appeal issue is that the processing building will be incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood and residents' health and quality of life. The project is solely for review of the design of the processing building. The BAR found that the design, height, and scale of the building is compatible with the character of the surrounding natural environment. The design of the processing building will not have any impacts to health or quality of life. Additionally, the project is compatible with the neighborhood as it is an agricultural use and will be surrounded by agricultural zoning and development. According to the SBAR bylaws and coastal zoning ordinance, the purpose of the SBAR is to encourage developments which exemplify the best professional design practices. The aspects considered in the SBAR's review of a project include the height, bulk, and scale of structures, the colors and types of building materials, the relation of structures on site and in the surrounding area, site layout, orientation, and location of buildings, location and type of landscaping, and appropriateness of sign designs and exterior lighting. This design review is exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15268, the exemption for ministerial projects. A project is ministerial for CEQA purposes if the agency reviewing the project lacks authority to address environmental impacts. The land use entitlements for the processing structure have already been approved, and the Planning Commission does not have authority to address environmental impacts under the county's design review ordinance. Staff recommends that your commission deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval included in Attachment A of the staff report, determine that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to State CEQA Guidelines Section 15268, and grant de novo preliminary design review approval. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Do we have questions from the commission? Commissioner Reed.
Two questions. First, I've got the height of the proposed building. Do you have, how high are all those surrounding greenhouse structures at the peak?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reed, from finished floor, the greenhouses in front of the proposed processing structure are 23 feet 6 inches, but from existing grade, they have a maximum height of 24.5 inches.
So the greenhouses are taller than this building?
That's correct.
Okay. Secondly, I just looked at the roof plan for the building. What's the roof material going to be on the building, and what color is it going to be?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reed, it is corrugated steel, and it will be, I believe, bronze. But I can let the applicant speak to that.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Reed, the SBAR did request to the applicant that they make it bronze, and that would be worked out at the final, when they go back for the final
Okay.
BAR permit.
So in other words, you're going to have a building that's like forest green and desert sand with a bronze-colored roof.
Correct.
Sounds like it'll be one of the more attractive things in that neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
They're shaking their head no.
So, Madam Chair, just, and Commissioners, we might want to defer this to when the applicant's presentation, so that way we can make sure we have balanced time between applicant and appellant, and then we can defer that question during that time.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Reed?
That's okay. But just to answer, the BAR did approve this design that went forward, just so, yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Park?
Yes. I was going to ask the same question that Commissioner Reed asked about height, so you answered that. I had a couple other things. Could you go to slide 4? Okay, I want to tell you, I love this slide because I've been on this commission and I've never exactly understood the BAR process and where we are, because if we're doing appeals, I ought to understand that
We
process.
did this on purpose for our own benefit as well.
Well, so my question is, will you please keep it and put it in some general file so it can be pulled out and stuck into every presentation whenever we have BAR appeal? But no, really, this was very well done. Let me go on to where I actually have a kind of more of a specific question. Slide 11. Oops, is that 11 or is that 10? There you go. This, of course, is a statement of an appeal issue raised by the appellant and then the response. And my question are the issues that are raised in Appeal Issue 4, is that within the purview of the Board of Architectural Review? Because it kind of looks and smells like finding 2.1.5 we do for CUPs.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Park, yes, this finding was made as part of the CUP that it would be compatible with the neighborhood. The BAR does have a finding regarding neighborhood compatibility, but that is with regards to the design and height and orientation of the building.
Well, but does the BAR have a finding with respect to health or quality of life?
No, they do not.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, in regards to the same slide, my question focuses in on what is the definition, well, the boundaries of the neighborhood are we looking at? 200 feet from this building, 300 feet? What's the definition of neighborhood?
Commissioner Martinez, I'm not sure how to answer that one. I don't know if neighborhood, we can look and see if there's a definition, if BAR has a definition of neighborhood. I'm not aware of one off the top of my head. We can look into it.
Okay,
I think
because
the general vicinity, and this is in the CARP Ag overlay, which is a defined area with specific standards to that area, so we could contain it to the CARP Ag overlay area.
okay,
A good way to look at it, yeah.
because that's what I'm trying to understand is how the conclusion or the staff's response is that it's compatible with the neighborhood. So I'm looking at the elements of how you define the neighborhood to understand how it's compatible with it.
And again, so this is BAR found, BAR preliminary approved it, so they found that it was compatible with the development in the general area in the CARP Ag overlay with similar greenhouse and ag structural development.
Okay.
That was their finding, yep. And we're reiterating it, and we think that they made the correct finding.
So the residential areas around this development, this building is how far, would you tell me?
Do you guys know what the closest residence is? Do you want to show them the aerial? And just as a reminder, Chair Martinez, this is ag zoned. So you can see, okay. And if you could put your cursor this is where the processing building will go. So it's surrounded completely by other greenhouse and ag structural development. You can see residences, I don't know how far that is to
Yeah.
the north.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, the distance from Foothill Road to the processing building is 750 feet. And then from Via Real, which is here, would be 650 feet. But there are greenhouses on both adjacent lots.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you, because, I mean, that seems like the only area really where I feel we have a little bit of discretion on, but the other stuff seems pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll stay on that same subject. I remember, and many of my fellow commissioners are probably too young to remember the
Come on.
initial concern, I'll say, of the community, a portion of the community of Carpinteria Valley, that we were going to be looking out our windows at a significant number of reflective glass greenhouses. And so the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors at that time, and Mr. Higgins will correct me if I'm wrong, decided to divide the growing area into two parts, and one would allow greenhouses to be built and one would not. But it established the principle that there may be an inconsistency with the appearance of the proposed project here and compatibility with the neighborhood if it's the wrong place. So I realized when I talked with Ms. Brown that she was way too new and young to talk about that issue, but maybe now you had an opportunity to say, when would that have been dealt with by the BAR?
And can I ask a question to Commissioner Cooney to clarify? Are you talking about something in the cannabis ordinance development or the CARP ag overlay?
I'm really staying away. I think it's a separate issue about the odor and how that needs to be dealt with. I'm talking about a different issue, which is view. And there are many reflective greenhouses in the valley. And so at some point, I assume the BAR considered whether this was compatible or not. And I believe they decided it was compatible, but I'm just interested in the background of how they reached that decision.
We may need to
So-
get back to, oh, do you have that answer? Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, are you referring to on this, sorry, for this project when they found it compatible, or in general for the CARP ag overlay?
No, for this project. We're talking about building much larger than the typical greenhouse development, and from what I've read, a lot of the objection comes from the size of the building. Obviously, steps have been taken to cut down on glare and reflection, and that's relevant. Is that the kind of discussion that the the BAR had?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, the colors and details are typically finalized at the final review. The BAR did review the project size and scale both at conceptual and preliminary review. They took formal action on September 20th, I believe, to approve it and consider it, or made the findings that it is consistent with the neighborhood. With regards to the square footage, the original development plan for the site, which was approved in, I believe, 1988, did approve a greenhouse in this location. And that was amended in 2018, and then an amendment was done with the land use entitlements for this project to modify that to be a processing structure instead of a greenhouse. But this level of development or square footage was anticipated with the original development plan.
Okay, well, we're the bar now, right, as you explained. So that's a persistent concern I have going forward, but thank you for that. And, you know, in fact, you and I spoke about the complex nature of this matter because of its history of review over many years. And the normal concern we find most prevalent in carpentry is about the odor and how to contain it. Where in this process, before the BAR or otherwise, was that discussed and decided?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cooney, there was an odor abatement plan approved with the land use entitlements, which went to the Planning Commission in, I believe, I'll pull it up. Between 2020 and 2022, it went to the zoning administrator, then the Planning Commission, and then the board. And the odor abatement plan includes carbon filtration units, and the processing area would be fully enclosed in the processing structure.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
I have a question. Commissioner Cooney's question brought this
to my mind. I was looking from your staff report. You indicate, well, on page 3, that originally 415,830 square feet were approved for development as greenhouses. One of those sites was not developed, which could have accommodated a 60,000 square foot greenhouse, but instead we're getting a 25,418 square foot processing building. So it's quite modest in footprint compared to what could have been built on that particular segment, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reed, that's correct. They can build a greenhouse of that square footage on the site. It was approved under the development plan, but the amendment approved the processing building in place of that greenhouse.
Thank you. I had a couple, are you done? Sorry. I had a couple questions in terms of process. I understand the SBAR process, all the BAR processes as they funnel into PC and then onto the board. In terms of litigation, and not that I'm foreshadowing this, but there's this concept that you have to exhaust all your administrative remedies before you can file litigation. So I believe that preliminary approval by BAR is an appealable step, correct? And that's why we're here after the preliminary approval. Is there a second appeal allowed under final action? I think that's the double indemnity idea, right?
Madam Chair, it would only be appealable if there are major revisions to the project's design.
Okay. That was my only question. All right, seeing no other questions from the commission, we go to our appellant, Ms. Stasinos, and we've worked out a 15-minute presentation time by her with 5 minutes additional for rebuttal, and then we would have the applicant have that same amount of time, though my understanding is they may not need it, but that's your budget. And please state your name for the record before you
Okay.
begin, and then you'll be
Again, I can't
timed.
tell
You'll
if
see
you
the
can
names.
hear me or not, so you'll have to let me know if I'm speaking too softly or too loudly.
Well, you might want to go up a little bit, but let's see if Mr. Villalobos can adjust it for us with a swipe of a finger.
Oh, okay. How's
Much
that?
better.
Okay.
See?
All
You
right.
didn't even have to speak out louder.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, good morning, Commissioners and Madam Chair. My name is Jill Stasinos, and I live less than 2 miles away from 3561 Foothill Road. Almost every time I drive by that location, I have to roll up my car windows because the stench makes it difficult for me to breathe. When I learned that Mr. Farrar was proposing to build a cannabis processing facility on the site, I decided I had to file an appeal due to the knowledge that cannabis processing facilities are the stinkiest part of the industry, and the greenhouses at 3561 Foothill Road were already causing air quality concerns. So a cannabis processing facility would only exacerbate the problem. P&D staff gave you the history of 3561 Foothill Road in their staff report, and I'm reiterating what they already gave you to point out that the greenhouses were permitted to be a maximum of 20 feet tall in 2018. Yet P&D staff reported in 2025 that the greenhouses are actually closer to 24 feet tall. This is a 4 foot taller than permitted. Also, P&D staff reported in 2021 that Mr. Farrar wanted to construct a 25-foot tall cannabis processing facility. And now in 2025, they're reporting that he wants to build a 21-foot, 4.5 inches tall processing structure that was previously permitted to be the side of a 6th greenhouse with a maximum height of 20 feet. Therefore, if permitted, the processing facility would be 1 foot, 4.5 inches taller than the originally permitted 20-foot tall greenhouse. There have been hundreds of odor complaints filed against G&K Farms, including one diligent neighbor who logged 595 odor complaints since 2019 about 3561 Foothill Road. And late yesterday afternoon, I received from P&D staff 14 pages with 492 odor complaints specific to G&K Farms. The only way I haven't had a lot of time to analyze the difference of 103 odor complaint discrepancy between the P&D staff filing. The only thing I can figure is that this was started in 2021, and the neighbors started their odor complaint log in 2019. Also, every time the neighbor specifically mentioned the address of 3561, I highlighted it in red and I counted it. So if the neighbor said it was between the address of 3561 Foothill Road and another nearby vicinity, I still counted it every time the neighbor mentioned the address 3561.
Mrs.
So that's-
Sinos, I'm going to take a moment here.
Sure.
This appeal is about the design review, and I didn't go through your presentation carefully enough last night to have that comment with you today. But if you can focus your comments on the design review findings that we're here to address, that would
Okay.
help. And odor is actually not part
Right,
of that.
but I
So-
think it's really important for you to see this. That's why I spent the time, and this is double-sided. I mean, what you have in front of you
understand.
is double-sided.
I understand. Just
So
focus on design review,
It's a
please.
concern of the residents, and that's why I bring it up. So again, these numerous complaints regarding the foul odors emanating from G&K. And I myself have filed probably at least 100. So the community has strong concerns about G&K Farms. They filed appeals in 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. And I listed some of the neighbors' concerns in my bullet points. Bullet points here. Residents have been complaining about the negative effect of, again, the cannabis smell. They say it's causing them health issues such as migraine headaches, runny eyes, allergies, nausea, dizziness, and difficulty breathing. Concerns exist about air quality and the environment also being negatively affected by the foul odors. Additionally, the proximity of 3561 Foothill Road to the environmentally sensitive habitat of Arroyo Paradigm Creek and the potential harm the vapor phase misting could have on the plants and animals living there. The proposed cannabis facility is not compatible with the nearby residential neighborhoods and will create an eyesore, especially if it is taller than the 5 greenhouses. The landscape screening doesn't screen the public view of G&K's greenhouses and proposed cannabis processing building from EDRNs like La Mirada and Foothill Road. The size of the proposed structure is too large and is almost the same size as half a football field. 356,070 square feet of cannabis is currently being cultivated in the greenhouses at G&K Farms. Increasing the density from 379,757 square feet to 405,175 square feet, when including the proposed processing facility, cumulatively creates too great a density of cannabis structures on the property. Up to 50% of the cannabis processed at the proposed processing building will be trucked in from other sites. This will lead to safety concerns for drivers on the 2-lane road of Via Real. Using prime ag land for industrial, commercial cannabis processing, and I know that came up, that this is ag land, it's zoned for ag land, and yet this is not really, in my mind, an ag land use. This is more industrial, commercial use, and this is the most odorous activity. It's not compatible with the neighborhood. This slide just shows the first page of the attachment I gave you with the one neighbor who logged all of these complaints for 3561, and I went through and highlighted all of them. And again, it's two-sided, and I believe you have 23 or 24 pages of it. This photo depicts the view of where the proposed cannabis processing facility is to be built and the 5 G&K greenhouses. Okay, so that's the photo with the blue arrow pointing to the proposed cannabis processing site at 3561 demonstrates, I think it's this one, demonstrates the proximity of the many nearby EDRNs. The red arrow on the upper right-hand side of the photo points to La Mirada, which is less than a half a mile away from G&K Farms. The Las Conchas Polo condos are 1 mile away from G&K. Podaro Lane is 750 feet away from G&K. And across the street from 3561 Foothill Road is a rural residential neighborhood. And so you can see all of those highlighted in red. Thank you for using your pointer. I put in italics the project description for G&K's cannabis processing building from the from the 2021 P&D staff report. My questions are, has the applicant reduced the proposed processing building's height? Has the applicant increased the height of the 5 existing greenhouses beyond the originally permitted in 2018 20 feet? Why would Santa Barbara County reward a, quote, bad neighbor by allowing them to build a cannabis processing facility, the stinkiest part of commercial cannabis, near EDRNs, when G&K has hundreds of odor complaints? If Santa Barbara County does allow G&K to build a cannabis processing facility, what will the Air Pollution Control District's responsibility be regarding compliance and enforcement? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Promises. Quarterly inspections will take place only during the first year. For the public to get access to Geosyntax findings on odor complaint investigations, residents must file a public records request, thereby making public access to Geosyntax inspections findings very difficult. The weather monitoring equipment is required in G&K's 2021 OAP for its proposed processing facility to continuously record and transmit weather data, including wind speed, direction, barometric pressure to identify the variables and conditions that can affect odor episodes. G&K promises in their 2021 OAP for its proposed processing facility to deploy continuously over a 7-day period the best available odor monitoring device method to measure cannabis odor causing emissions at the perimeter of the property. G&K promises to build a state-of-the-art, airtight cannabis processing facility. But how do you keep malodors from escaping the building as workers enter and leave? G&K was given 5 years in 2019 to screen their greenhouses to the maximum extent feasible. In August 2025, it will be 5 years. It is time for Santa Barbara County staff to issue a notice of landscape screening violation to 3561 Foothill Road. In the contract Graham Farrar signed with the Santa Barbara Coalition for Responsible Cannabis, he promised to install in G&K's greenhouses the best available odor control technology. G&K farm greenhouses still use vapor phase misting for odor control. Mr. Farrar promised in G&K's 2021 OAP for the proposed cannabis processing building to be a good neighbor and responsible member of the community. Graham Farrar agreed to observe a set of community odor guidelines that were developed through collaboration between the Cannabis Association for Responsible Producers, CARP Growers, and the Santa Barbara Coalition for Responsible Cannabis Coalition. The agreement signed August 21st between CARP Growers and the Coalition states that using regenerative carbon scrubbers is currently the best available odor control technology. And Graham Farrar of G&K Produce, LLC, signed the Community Odor Guidelines Agreement. Mr. Farrar has not installed carbon filter scrubbers in the 5 G&K greenhouses. How can Mr. Farrar be trusted to be a good neighbor and follow his 2021 OAP for the proposed cannabis processing facility when 3561 Foothill Road has so many odor complaints? These photos were taken from Foothill Road on February 1st to show the poor landscape screening of the greenhouses at 3561 Foothill Road. Perhaps the vapor phase misting chemicals are stunting the growth of the trees planted to screen the greenhouses. The neighbors and public have had to put up with this eyesore for almost 5 years. Solutions. Require story poles for the public to see the proposed cannabis processing structure's height and solicit public comment on the views of the proposed processing facility after the story poles are up. Require elimination of malodors from the cannabis grown in the 5 G&K greenhouses prior to even considering a construction permit for a new cannabis processing structure. Require the installation of effective carbon filter scrubbers in the 5 G&K greenhouses. Require better screening to improve the public's view of the greenhouses from Foothill Road and the nearby EDRNs. In so doing, I believe Santa Barbara County officials will regain the public's trust. In conclusion, I respectfully request that you approve my appeal and deny the applicant's proposed cannabis processing facility. Thank you.
Thank you, and just to remind you, you'll have 5 minutes for rebuttal too after the end of the public comment. No, actually, after the end of the public comment? Later on.
I have a comment.
Okay, just a moment, yeah. Commissioner Park?
Yes.
Stay at the podium, please, Mr. Cinos.
You know, I admire your perseverance. Some commissioners will find some of the information in your slideshow more germane than others for today's thing.
I understand that.
But I want to make a suggestion, because you do have a few minutes for rebuttal, and that is, consider if you bring up the greenhouse heights again, that there's some confusion in the information you provided as to whether you are referring to height from the finished floor or height from grade. And the staff report by Ms. Brown identifies the difference between the two and discusses that when it discusses heights. So for example, the height from the finished floor, I think on this one is 21 feet and 21 and a quarter feet, but the overall height is just shy of 24 feet or 25 feet. And I think if you address this again in your rebuttal, please try to identify, are you talking about height from finished floor or grade height? Because it may be that some of the discrepancies that you've identified are actually just a mixing of the two terms. There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cinos. Commissioner Reed may also have a question.
Yeah, I have a question or two. You mentioned, you made reference to the 3 prior appeals of this project, and you said the committee had made those appeals. You said that?
Different members of the community have, yes.
Oh, okay, because you used the word committee, I thought.
Committee?
I don't know. I just.
Sorry, I meant community has
Okay,
filed.
because I had a question.
Residents in the community have filed numerous
Okay,
appeals of this
all right.
project.
That clears it up, because I noticed on this current appeal, you're the sole appellant.
Right, for this particular processing, for this, at this time, yes, I am the sole at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins?
Morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jay Higgins, representing the owner and the applicant here. I guess I'll start with a couple comments, perhaps in response to some of the questions I heard the commissioners make. I'm not sure they'll be helpful, but I think they need to be made. With respect to the original entitlements dating back to 1986, and then certainly more recently between 2013, 14, 15, 16, that period of time did see an entitlement that was obtained by the former owner for an increase in the greenhouses that was above what the original 1986 approval allowed. Starting in, call it 17, 18, Mr. Farrar picked up the property and began his quest with the county on permitting the site for cannabis. Was one of the first properties in Carpinteria to gain a cannabis land use permit, putting cannabis in the existing greenhouses. Fast forward a little bit, we came back to the county for a warehouse, and I'll have to repeat this a couple times because it's really important. The warehouse proposal did in fact replace part of what was already entitled in 1986 under a development plan. And just to go one level deeper here, in terms of Area A versus Area B in the Carp Ag Overlay zoning ordinance, this part is Ag Overlay A, which does allow more sort of, call it, commercial, industrial, agricultural buildings compared to Area B. We came back and did amend the development permit application, and that was an application filed in 2019. Took us a while to get to the zoning administrator, but the zoning administrator approved that project. And that process took a while, not because things take a while. It was a tedious review of all of the codes and prior permit history with respect to the development plan and Carpeg overlay ordinance. And I should just stop here for a second and suggest that if we need to go back and do that more thoroughly at another hearing on a continuance, then we wouldn't object. Wouldn't be I'm not advocating for that because we've already done it. And I don't know if whether or not county council would have any issues with having to do that again or do that here today for that matter because of what was noticed today. I don't think that was part of the public notice that we were going to relitigate all of that. But notwithstanding, that's a good question. Hopefully we can settle it today. Your commission on appeal of the zoning administrator hearing or approval vetted all of this again. I want to say it was probably 21, late 21. I don't know how many hearings it took. It's possible it could have taken more than one. But it was approved. And all of those issues with respect to development footprint, compatibility in terms of use, visibility, in fact, was part of the record too, or the discussion, because we had gone to SBAR prior to the zoning administrator hearing, and SBAR unanimously moved us on to the zoning administrator, noting that the building was pretty far away from the roads, couldn't be seen from Villa Real, couldn't be seen from Foothill, in fact, because of the height differential in the grade, and certainly the intervening greenhouses that were already there and approved. Sure, there's a possible area up on La Mirada where you can see everything, including the Channel Islands. It might take issue with the telephoto lens that was used, but we did have an image of that view during the SBAR with a standard zoom lens, and sure, you can see everything. And you can also see that the photo simulation used, it would have not been detectable really in comparison with the other buildings surrounding it. So then we went to the Board of Supervisors. Of course, that was approved and then appealed to the Coastal Commission, and that was a pretty long saga. It might have taken 4 years. So after the Coastal Commission hearing, we took some time to work with the applicant team. They wanted to potentially redo some of the interior floor plans or functionality in the building, so it took us a while to get back to BAR. And BAR there, I think, reacted somewhat to a lot of public opposition at the hearing, but nonetheless, they approved the project 6-1. It's important to remember that, and you all probably know this, but and I don't really take any issue with Ms. Testino's presentation. In fact, I agree. Processing can be something that causes odor, more odor than, say, greenhouse cultivation. And the reason for that is most of the growers in carp are doing processing in older, partly rehabilitated barns that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not for cannabis, these were literally barns that were used for storage of whatever, farm implements, didn't meet building codes, didn't meet flood elevations, very old, and they didn't, in most cases, even have building permits because at the time those were considered ag buildings. So a lot of them have been sort of retrofitted with some odor control, my understanding, but I believe only one right now is purpose-built or purpose retrofitted to a higher standard, and this would be the second brand-new building that would be purpose-built for processing with odor control. Part of the reason the roof is not 20 feet or 18 feet or 12 feet is it's got an attic level, so to speak. That's where all the HVAC equipment goes. It's a lot of HVAC equipment that goes in there, so it can create a negative pressure inside the first floor of the building where cannabis is taken immediately from the greenhouse inside a building. It doesn't sit in a truck. Trucks that come to pick up the cannabis don't have odor control on them, I don't think. They may be refrigerated, but anyway, cannabis will come immediately out of the greenhouse and into the processing building that's got negative pressure. And I forget the term, but when you walk into a Starbucks or a 7-Eleven, there's the air vent that sucks air in, and that's what all the doors, roll-up doors and otherwise have on this building. So I just want to reiterate that this is a reaction to what the county, I think, wants, is trying to get to in terms of odor control cannabis buildings. I haven't been following to the T what's been going on in the last year or so with regard to your odor code amendments or potential amendments, but I want to say I think those are related to outdoor grows or greenhouses. And the discussion about Infinity scrubbers, those are particular technology that are suited for greenhouses where greenhouses have high humidity or other weather conditions. And so let's not get confused about what your direction is with what you're trying to regulate, which I believe is outdoor or greenhouse grows, and how can you do that? This is a different type of project and technology, one that already has carbon scrubbers in the proposed building. All right, sorry. Just with respect to the design review process, yes, the BAR asked us to reconsider some colors. We can reconsider those today. The roof of the roof doesn't have to be sand color, but it shouldn't be dark. It should try to blend it. There's some environmental issues associated with the color of the roof. We don't want it to be too dark because that absorbs heat. And if you defer that particular item with some comments back to the BAR, we would appreciate it. We obviously are able to put dark green or dark bronze on the exterior of the building. That's not a problem. It's more of we're trying to do what we can within the confines of the process and accept community input, noting, however, that the building can't be seen but for when you're inside the property line. You can see the roof perhaps from a long ways away, but the color of the building, we're amenable. I do have Kent Mixon here. He's our project architect. If you have any architectural questions, of course, Jared Ficker is here too. If you get into odor questions that I can't handle. Did I miss anything? Okay. I'm around for questions. I might want to take a little extra time after we hear from the appellant too, if I'm able. Thank you.
Thank you. I had one question. You just said that the roof should not be dark, but I thought I heard that the roof was proposed to be bronze. So maybe staff can clarify this, or maybe your architect can. What is the proposed roof color?
Good morning, Commissioners and Chair.
State your name.
Kent Mixon, architect for Andalotti's Mixon Architects. The proposed, which was in the presentation, was the green siding, and it has a desert sand roof. That matches the existing warehouse that's out there now. In the last SBAR, they asked if we could change the green to a bronze. I did not take that was the roof that they were asking for, because the trim, we didn't talk specifically about the trim, but as Jay mentioned, if we do a dark roof, that just makes the mechanical systems work harder and longer because it heats up the building, essentially. We would entertain whatever you guys think, but my personal feeling is that it shouldn't be a dark color.
Okay, I see. So the minutes say change color to dark bronze. I guess.
That was from the green. What I took, it was from the green to the bronze versus the exterior siding. If you look at the elevation that she had, it's green siding, and then the trim on the eave and the roof were a desert sand color.
All right, so who can help us with what SBAR requested? Maybe staff can interject here.
Madam Chair, I believe one member requested that the siding would be bronze, and they were planning on finalizing the color under final review, but then it was appealed. I can pull up the elevation again to show the sand roof color, and if you wanted to comment on that.
Well, unless SBAR is telling us to do something other with the roof, I would assume that that's what's in front of us, the sand. Oh, I'm sorry, and Mr. Higgins, this
Madam
is
Chair, if
really
you want
your
to start the
time.
clock again, I forgot to mention landscaping. That did come up at the BAR hearing. So we weren't prepared to talk about that, so it was a little awkward. The trees that had been planted were not in good health. That was prior to the BAR hearing. I was told after the hearing that they, in fact, had been replanted, so we did replant. I do have some photos of what's there now. There are new coastal redwood trees that line the foothill. Behind them is a oleander hedge. There are some ash trees and oak tree, and they are growing. And my understanding in terms of permit compliance or how P&D has reviewed that, they have, because there are annual inspections, as they're satisfied that we have met the standards of the cannabis code and our entitlements. Happy, though, to entertain anything else you'd like to take back to BAR.
And I understand. Mr. Seward?
Yes, Chair Bradley, so here's what we got. This is what was approved, and the roof, Willow, is the desert sand. Right, so this was approved, but then again, it has to go back to final BAR, and some members have said that they're interested in a bronze. So that's going to get worked out at that final. If you guys have a preference that you want to put forward, we can include that as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And we can, I made a mistake here. I actually started asking Mr. Higgins stuff. This is still his presentation. We can opine on that when we get to deliberations. But Mr. Reed, did you have a question for?
Oh, yeah, because my original questions, I didn't realize, so that desert sand from that elevation, it looks like it only applies to the soffits above the entrances, but that also is the roof of the entire building that was proposed originally, the desert sand?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, to me, either one of those are okay, but changing the walls to bronze from that nice green, you can tell where I'm leaning there. I like that green, but, you know.
Well, we'll get to that in deliberations too. Commissioner Park?
Yeah, I have a question for staff, or really anyone. I listened carefully to Ms. Tessino's presentation, which kind of brought up everything but the kitchen sink, and I understand that as sort of strategic for the overall gestalt of the kinds of hearings we're having on cannabis. I'm not criticizing you. I didn't hear any point on appeal discussing the color of the roof. So, you know, I'm not going to be the one who cuts off planning commission members, but I wonder why we're spending time talking about the colors when the appellant never even brought them up, and it's not a point on appeal. But if you want to talk about it, let's do it.
Mr. Higgins, it's actually still your time to continue. Are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, if you have any questions.
Okay. Okay, so with that, we proceed to public comment, and I have 2 speaker slips in front of me. Is there anyone online, Mr. Villalobos?
We do have some attendees online. If you'd like to speak on this item, go ahead and raise your hand virtually.
Okay, do we want to take them first, or I think we should start with people in the room. Okay, so our first speaker is Amy Weems, to be followed by Ana Carrillo, and then we'll go to our speakers online. Amy Weems, and if you can limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
So we live.
Start with your name.
Oh, Amy Weems.
Thank you.
My family is the Vasta family. That's the owner of the property at 3498 Villa Real, which is a neighboring property of G&K and Gallup and Stribling. We've been there for 65 years. No one seems to know that we're there. They're in the picture. We're in the pictures that have been put up on the slides, and you can see our property. We are directly behind G&K. We might be, I don't know, 100 feet from the proposed building. We do share an easement driveway with both companies. My dad is 92 years old and has Alzheimer's. Upon his passing, we'll need to make a decision whether to rent or sell our property. So property value is our overall concern here, and there's a few concerns within that I'll just touch on briefly. One of them is smell and air quality, which we've talked about already today. So we just want to know that the latest technology, which we understand to be the carbon scrubbers, will be utilized. Our main concern is driveway. There's an easement agreement between G&K and Gallup & Stribling, of which we are the third-party beneficiary. The agreement states that G&K will maintain the easement driveway. The driveway is in very poor condition and has been for a long time. Paving is broken down, there are potholes, there's a blind spot, which makes the chronic speeding, which occurs daily, and lack of speed bumps extremely dangerous for oncoming cars as well as pedestrians, one of which is my dad, who walks to the mailbox. For 6 years, we've been trying to get the driveway situation resolved, and now with the poor condition and the additional building, and therefore increased traffic, the driveway issues at hand are an even bigger issue. What will be done to mitigate the increased traffic, such as, are they going to open up the other entrances to employees for entrance? Obviously, there's going to be very large semi-trucks that will have to enter through Via Real. With that, the semi-trucks that currently come there now have to go off the driveway, and there's a big plume of dust and dirt that comes into our property every time they drive by. Over the last few years, we have been working with G&K to get the driveway repaired and paved. It has not happened as of yet, and the plan moving forward is not to pave the entire driveway. Our final concern is the view, which I think has been addressed today. So, overall, our concern is not, our property value as well as our overall quality of living on the property. Those are my...
Thank you. Before you leave, could we ask staff to bring up the vicinity map so I'm clear about where this access point is?
Yeah,
I think this came up in earlier.
We're smack dab in the middle of it all, so.
So on this,
If she brings it up, I think it was slide 2.
I think and you're talking about access easement from Via Real, correct?
Yeah, our access from Via Rail. I mean, we've been there, like I said, since I think 1960, well, long before there were, I think it was fields of lemons and baby's breath before the greenhouses. So, shoot, it was easier with the red outline. Yeah,
Right.
so the bottom left corner, that whole area right in front of that, that's our area, that's our property. And see the access, the road. So if you see the Via Real entrance, that corner is a blind spot, and they're speeding every day, all day, by customers and employees. The employees park in that dirt part at the front by Via Real. So this has been just, an ongoing issue. And especially my dad, not as much anymore, but every day walking to the mailbox numerous times because he doesn't remember he's checked the mail. And wondering if he's going to be hit, that time.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Thank you.
I have a quick
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
Your property as shown in here is just residential, correct?
Just residential.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, our second speaker is Anna Correa.
So just addressing her issue on the plans that were just, I'm sorry, my name is Anna Carrillo.
Thank you.
And so if you look on page SP-101, you can see how the whole driveway to G&K, to Gallup and Stribling, which was, it's Vista Verde that is no longer going to be cannabis, how that all comes in below the warehouse. You can see it there too. So anyway, I'd like to make a few comments. The landscaping on Foothill does not provide adequate coverage. That has been talked about. the pictures that Jill, or I'm sorry, Ms. Tessino showed were taken just this week. So, he's had trouble, we think, using the vapor phase for the first set of plants that were put in. I actually had made a complaint. I included an odor complaint. This was all the way back in, 2022. And I also had put in a landscaping complaint. So at that time, staff went out and I got a response for the landscaping complaint that this would not be acceptable if this was still the condition in 5 years, and 5 years comes up in August. So I just wanted to, verify, because the greenhouses on both sides of him are very well concealed. One has the oleander that's been growing there for years, and the other one is set way back from the road. This just happens, and it's the same problem, well, unfortunately, at another location of Graham's, where the trees don't cover the greenhouses effectively. The new processing warehouse, we want to make sure that it's no taller, than the 5 greenhouses. So again, I know it was brought up, are we talking from grade, or are we talking from whatever the other term was, and I'm not an architect, so, we didn't, know that. I just want them to be, less visible. And I know from Foothill Road, we will not see the processing. I know from Villa Real, we will not see the processing, because on Villa Real, there's a lot of green space or green growth already from trees, not on his property, but they're along Villa Real. I do suspect maybe from the Highway 101, it's even mentioned in the staff report on, on the high part. Oops, sorry, I'm going to run out of time. Then the other thing I just wanted to share, and I know this is not about, odor complaints, but Graham did write me that yes, this was back in 2021, that he's willing to put in the carbon scrubbers, but the county was preventing him. And so then I wrote to Lisa Plowman to ask exactly, and it was again having to resubmit an application. And so that's kind of where, we've, ended. So we're just asking, please uphold this appeal and make the finding that building a new large 25,000 square foot processing warehouse on prime agricultural soil is not compatible with the neighborhood. We're talking about the one resident next door, La Mirada, the polo field, just because we haven't settled the whole issue with the smells. And then when you do report a complaint, and then what is APCD's role in it? We don't really understand. I know they have to get some sort of permit. Do they already have it? Will they do the compliance and the enforcement? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carrillo. Go to online.
All right, for any of our speakers online, if you'd like to speak on this item, I don't see any hands raised currently. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand now. No hands raised.
Okay. So that closes our public comment period, and then we go back to rebuttal options. Does staff want to have anything at this point to comment on?
Chair Bradley, the agent may be able to speak more to this, but the existing landscape plan was approved as part of the cannabis cultivation in the greenhouses, and it did die, and so was replanted, I believe, approximately 9 months ago, and so that's currently growing. And I can clarify the raised or the height increase for the greenhouses on site. The amendment approved in 2018 approved a height change. Originally it was 20 feet, and they approved a height increase up to 24 and a half feet for the existing greenhouses on site.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions about that? Okay. So with that, we would actually go back to the appellant to make any rebuttal comments. They have 5 minutes remaining.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Park requested that I revisit the proposed cannabis processing building's height, but Willow just said that things changed in 2018, which I was not aware of. And I admit, I'm not an architect. I'm a teacher by profession, so I have difficulty reading all these building plans, but I do the best I can. So my concern was, even if the proposed processing facility was 25 feet from grade and 21 feet, 4.5 inches from the building's floor, that it was still 1 foot, 4.5 inches taller than the 20 feet originally permitted in 2018. But now Ms. Brown is saying that it was modified, and I was not aware of that. I thought the maximum height that was permitted for those greenhouses was 20 feet, and that even though that unbuilt sixth greenhouse was also to be a maximum of 20 feet. I will reiterate that also, even if the proposed cannabis processing building is state-of-the-art, how can the odors be confined to the inside of the building as the workers enter and leave the building? And then last, I attended the SBAR hearing, and at the time, they granted preliminary approval based on some building color changes and plantings to screen the processing building. Also, a SBAR member at the time mentioned that for G&K to be a better neighbor, they should consider improving the screening of the greenhouses at 3561 Foothill Road from public views. And he said he pulled it up on his phone and was looking at the map on Google Maps, and he could see what an eyesore it was from the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeCinos. Mr. Higgins, you have 5 minutes remaining as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commission. My client called me, and they don't prefer a continuance, so forget what I said about that. I was more reacting to what I was hearing about the history, which was long and tedious. So we have air curtains over the doors for pedestrian or vehicle access into the building. There's roll-up doors, there's man doors that used to be called. So those are air curtains, and those work off the HVAC system. So when the door opens, air goes in, it doesn't go out. This commission already reviewed the project and approved it. Circumstances have changed, so to speak, with the owner expectations. And again, I just want to remind everybody that this project meets the expectations then, and it, I think, it meets the expectations that you're currently deliberating on in other hearings. So this is not a cultivation project before you, and the project was approved already, so we did spend quite a lot of time and effort on that. So it'd be disappointing to see if that was not something that your commission held tight to. With respect to the design review scope today, we're I don't think in a position to lower the height of the building. We would have trouble with that because it can't be seen, and it's below the height limit of not only the zone district, but the Carpeg overlay zone district. It's materially in line with what's there now. And so we encourage you to approve the project and deny the appeal, and give any feedback that you may have for SBAR with respect to design, colors, or even landscaping. Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. I just had one question, and this is very tangentially related to design review, but the driveway, is that like an access easement that you all share? And I would expect, what is the terms of that in terms of how you all share costs for maintenance?
One of those questions I can answer, Madam Chair. It is an easement that was created when the two properties were subdivided. Might be 15 years ago or so. So it is a private easement. It is a dirt road, in some parts, partial asphalt. So I can't answer how it's maintained, though. I don't know the details on that easement.
Okay, it's not actually design review, so, hold on a second. Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, and thank you, Chair. My question is in regards to, I heard statements about, well, let me clarify my mind. Okay, so we have this building coming in. I'd only see one side with the picture, which is the rendition is with windows and so forth. Are there docking bays here on this thing? In other words, the items that's being processed, how is it transported from this building? Is it transported directly from this building?
Yeah, it goes in little carts from the greenhouses into the proposed building. There is a parking area in front. No loading dock? There's no loading dock, but product then comes out and packaged, already contained. There's no odor associated with once the product is packaged, then goes into trucks and leaves.
Okay, and so the trucks that are transporting this processed material, is it going off to what, Foothill or Villa Real?
Via Real.
Villa Real. Okay, so then are the trucks going to be different than what's existing? Because obviously you're doing transportation right now. I mean, nothing's just staying on the property. So are the trucks going to be the same, or are we looking at larger trucks? What are we looking at?
Yeah, Commissioners, Jared Ficker for the applicant. Actually, some of the trucks will end up being smaller and actually less frequent.
I'm sorry, you didn't introduce yourself as part of the team, so can you start with your name?
Sorry, Jared Ficker for the applicant.
Thank you.
Yeah. What we're trying to do is process on-site. Currently, the trip traffic that happens there happens much more frequently because as we're doing harvest, it's moving out for off-site processing. So if there's a processing facility on there, we actually can consolidate and reduce the trip traffic. Most of the trucks that will be there will be smaller box trucks or Sprinter vans, not semis moving product out of there. So it just gives you some insight. But actually, we do think this would result in less traffic because when you have a fresh product, you need to move it and process it right away. So we actually have to move product out and put vehicles on there and trucks to move stuff out there on a much more regular basis under the current conditions.
Okay, and is there an increase in the number of employees that are going to be on site?
There could be. I mean, we're limited on what we can do on that, so we have to comply with the number of employees we have on site already.
Okay, well, so that
Yeah.
I don't hear that as a
There's
yes or a no, so
not
it
in
looks
the
like a
zone.
yes.
It's in the use permit, yeah.
Pardon me?
Well, Jay, you can comment on that.
Through the chair, Commissioner Martinez, yes, there will be an increase in employees on site. And then that's part of the disclosures we made and the analysis that was done on the use permit that went to your commission, et cetera. So I think there's another 30 or 35 people, something like that. It's in the record.
Which are already in the land use permit.
Correct,
I mean,
already
this customer-
analyzed. We have a transportation demand management plan that discloses the times of day. We've got enough parking, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Higgins, I was attracted by your concept of continuance, and I realize the client may have a different desire. I don't want to trample on your relationship with your client, but I really think it would be helpful to the commission as opposed to the potential for denial at this point to fill in some of those gaps. What has been done and how could we make this a project which would be more palatable, not only for the immediate neighbors, but for the entire community? So I'm just alerting you in advance. That's the direction I'm thinking right now, and if you oppose that, it's fine with me.
Okay to react to that, Madam Chair? Okay. Well, we certainly don't think a denial is warranted. So I think channeling my client's legal counsel, we'd want to know today while you deliberate to what level we can do something with this project before you that pertains to the design scope. If you're wanting to wander into opening up the use permit or to talk about those things, I'm almost positive we wouldn't be excited about that. I don't think, based on the duration of time that is already run out on the approvals to date, we'd be in a position to really, I'm not sure how we would do that, but I'm all ears, particularly as it relates to the design review scope.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. I'm going to ask that we take a short break before we proceed with deliberation. So let's take 5 minutes just for a minute. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone, for allowing that break. I just want to touch base back with staff and just have us remind us the purpose of the hearing today is a design review appeal. So can you give us a quick reminder of that, and then we'll start on deliberations.
So, okay. Commissioners, thank you. There's been a lot of testimony and questions today. We appreciate all the discussion, and I know it can get confusing. So this structure was already approved with the permits that came before you. So this is only a design review project. We're talking about scale, we're talking about colors. So we brought up the findings again for design review to help you guys focus in on really the scope of what you're talking about. Traffic, all of that stuff is important, and odor, but we talked about that when we approved the cultivation permits and the previous permits. But today, it's just about the design of the building. So really, we wanted to focus you back on your very narrow purview for this permit review today. And hopefully these findings can help you guys.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we were at deliberations, and normally we go with our home district commissioners. So Commissioner Cooney, did you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would. This community I dearly love, and I've heard from a teacher of all people that there are problems, and staff did a credible job of presenting the current status of what is being sought today, design review. And one easy decision would be for us to just say, oh, it's all been decided, and tell the community that our hands were tied. We didn't have any discretion to do anything other than maybe talk about the paint color. I think there is a larger issue. I would be embarrassed if this matter went to court, Ms. Stasinos or anybody else, and said, the decision was made based on these prior decisions without staff first being able to assure the commission that we're on solid legal standing. And this issue of compatibility has been thoroughly decided, and we have a staff report that takes it into account. Now, the alternative, in my mind, is for me to simply oppose the approval motion if one of my fellow commissioners makes it today. What I would like to see is staff take into account the confusion that's been acknowledged, and we have another hearing in the near future on just the issues that are appropriate, and staff can say, your hands really are tied, and we think that you did a good job back in the era at which this matter was discussed. So it's a little bit long-winded way of saying I intend to vote no on staff's recommendation to go forward with a vote today, but would offer instead to refer it back to staff and let us know and let the applicant know sometime in the near future when we can have another relatively short hearing on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Park?
I've served with Commissioner Cooney for several years, and I remember appearing before Commissioner Cooney as an attorney, and sometimes I have to think through exactly what he's getting at, and I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you would prefer to continue this matter. Is that correct? It is. Yeah. And I was thinking of Dan Blau, because there's a dedication of a street for him next Monday. And I would frequently, when Dan was on the commission, come up with reasons to make a continuance or request a continuance on matters in my district. And he would look at me and kind of roll his eyes as to, okay, really? One more time? But he would always say to me, you know, if the commissioner from the district for which the project, where the project is located, asks for that, he would always support it. So I am completely willing to support your motion for continuance, whether I think there's a real merit in this project or not, just because you're asking for it. And I think that's appropriate in the way we work. So if you make that motion, I will second it.
Commissioner Reed.
First, in defense of my discussion about the roof color and the suggestion that it was superfluous, I'd like to look at the staff report, look at item 5 in findings for approval. It says there should be a harmony of material, color, and composition on all sides of the building. I would assume that includes the roof. So my concern was this thing shows up with a shiny galvanized roof in an area that's already years before expressed concerns with reflective surfaces. Therefore, I think my questions were appropriate. Okay. Second, in looking at this issue, I have a great deal of sympathy for the concerns of community members with respect to odors from the cannabis industry, from neighbors. We have heard great volumes of public comment in a good many hearings in the immediate area, and I fully respect the concerns of the people and the appellant who appear here today. But to me, and I certainly respect the feelings of Commissioner Cooney, since it is in his home district. But as with other items I have been involved with in past times, it appears to me this issue is very clear. It's an appeal of the decision of the SBAR on the design, size, compatibility of the structure. As such, I find that in no way does that approval, is it related to any proposed activities that may take place inside of that particular structure. And perhaps I am not privy to actions and hearings of several years ago, so perhaps my point of view is different than those who have. But to me, the matter seems rather clear-cut. When I look at the recommendations and procedures which came from staff and look at item 3, I think the final line in that, the Planning Commission lacks authority to address environmental impacts as part of the preliminary design review appeal. When I consider that, in light of what we're looking at and the grounds of the appeal, I would agree. So I will, at this point, just let you know that my opinion would be that I would agree with the recommendations of staff and deny the appeal. If, though, at some time, in another format, another hearing, the issues, the concerns of the community come up in an appropriate manner, I would be happy to, make a decision based on those. I just don't feel that in this particular case they are relevant.
Okay. Commissioner Martinez?
I do understand what's happening here in regards to this being the sole appeal. I mean, really, the issue is the appeal as is to the structure in regards to its design or color or whatever in regards to it. And I would too was confused by what happened here, but you have the appellant, and then I was surprised that the applicant even addressed like the odor and all that other stuff. I just threw me for a twist there. So I understand the issue, and I would agree with I would say that my opinion would be is that I do agree with the findings of the staff. I do have a caution, though, in regards to when the representative from this district is wanting one assurance in regards to making sure that the T is crossed and the I is dotted. I don't see any problem with that. especially if we come back and it says, well, the T is crossed and the I is dotted. I have no problem with that. So I know that one day I may be in the same position, and I hope that people remember that position when I ask for it. But what I'm getting at is this, is that I agree with what staff is saying and the recommendations, but if the district representative is looking for a continuance, I have the compassion towards that end.
Okay. I would not be inclined towards a continuance because I'm really not sure what more could be achieved at another hearing. This is clearly on design review. We have opened the door. We've heard testimony about everything else regarding a land use entitlement that's already been granted, appealed, taken all the way to the Coastal Commission, and held valid. That is the function and the use and the citing of this case. Today's matter is just about how it looks, its height, its consistency. SBAR has given us feedback that it is fine. It has a little bit of work it has to do, possibly on landscaping and final colors, and I trust that they will do that. I'm not hearing anything from the commission that would direct them to do anything differently on those matters. So I'm not inclined to support a continuation motion because this, as a side note, everything that was brought up by the public is very important. I understand it. However, this case, we didn't really talk about this, but I asked staff this yesterday. These cases now are also going to be caught up in everything that is part of the cannabis ordinance changes, which is even more aggressive than what was in place when G&K got this land use entitlement through all those steps, through SBAR, through Planning Commission, through Board of Supervisors, and the Coastal Commission. So the highest level of odor mitigation is going to be used. I also think the point about how this is a new building, and so it will be guaranteed to be the best technology from the sticks up is something for us to keep in mind. But frankly, that is not part of our deliberations under this appeal. This is just design review. So as much as I want to support my carpool mate and my first district commissioner, I might have former carpool mate. I'm getting left on the side of the road, you guys. I might have to vote against it just because I want to be clear that our function is design review. But we're still in deliberations. I'm going to ask Commissioner Cooney, what more does he perceive will be discussed at a continued hearing? What are you looking for?
What I am suggesting is rather than just indicate in my mind that this decision covers more than just the design, I would like to have staff have the time, separate and apart from a hearing, to review the recommendation. And if 2 weeks from now or whatever the time is, they come back and fill in the blanks that I have and say the same thing. We believe all you're doing is this, and these other matters are irrelevant. 5 years, 7 years ago, it was done. That's a big jump for us simply to say, okay, we agree, it's already been decided, but there might be something that was missed, something that wasn't completed, and I would not like to do this for any reason other than I think it makes sense to ask staff to assure us that their recommendation is to approve the project as is right now.
So I guess what I'm interpreting, and this is maybe a bridge to help staff know what to come back with, is you're really seeking more time to understand it with staff directly about the past entitlements and how there's nothing in there that would be reversed or complicated by approval of the design review in front of us. Correct. Okay. Mr. Travis still has a frown on his face, but I don't blame him. So I think then we're probably ready for a motion.
So, yeah, Chair and Commissioners, I mean, I think staff would assure you today that their analysis is correct. If you want to continue, that's the discretion of the board. I think just to fill out a little bit more on the blanks that Commissioner Cooney is indicating, I think that's where we're getting the clarification, needing to be expanded a little bit more as far as what are those blanks that would be different than what was presented to today. Because we have the staff report, we have testimony. So where is that gap? So that staff, if it is continued today, what would you want staff to come back with? And I'll try to repeat it, but I think we're still kind of struggling on what is the gaps. And if the gaps are to look at the prior approvals, the entitlement for the structure that we're looking at, and that those entitlements are apart and separate from the design review, and the design review is exactly that, and it doesn't change or impact any of those conditions or entitlements. And I think there was a comment earlier about the Carpinteria Ag Overlay and how this design fits into that Carpinteria Ag Overlay. If that's the question, then that gives staff a little bit more specificity on what they're going to come back and say. We looked at the Carp Ag Overlay, we looked at those standards, we looked at the prior entitlements. The scope of this review is narrow, and this is how it fits into the Carp Ag Overlay standards as far as design goes. So that's trying to reframe the question to staff, if that's what you want us to come back with.
Commissioner Cooney, can you help out?
Madam Chair, the whole purpose of asking for a continuance is to help me. Perhaps none of the other commissioners have any concerns about it, that this complicated history of this particular request, some of the issues are settled, and there's no doubt about them, but there is a concern, I think, that others might share, that we didn't look hard enough or deep enough to try and come up with the right answer. So I was simply opening to the commission, and I'm just one member of the commission, the concept that we will be sure, more assured than I feel today, that we can say we approve the application rather than we don't.
Okay, then do you want to proceed with the motion?
I would ask council if the motion to approve the project as presented today takes precedence over a motion to continue. But I would make a motion to continue if appropriate.
Through the chair, Commissioner Cooney, just to clarify, do you mean the order that the motions must go in, or what do you mean about taking precedence?
That's right. Should I move before one of my fellow colleagues has the opportunity to move approval of the project?
I think it's up to the chair. She has discretion in terms of that order, and either way is fine.
Well, as chair, I would appreciate your motion on your intent to continue and see how that goes before anything else is taken up.
That's fine. So that is my motion. I don't have a date. Mr. Wilson usually gives us one, but we've kind of sprung this on you. So we can even come up with that later on. But I do note that we have some lower requirements with some of our upcoming hearings.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioner Cooney, we're looking at February 5th at 1 o'clock. I'm just kidding. I'm just saying. In other words, trail the item. See if you're paying attention. Looking at, I tried, Commissioner Cooney.
It took a while.
Looking at February 26th, we just want to get confirmation from the appellant and the applicant that we could move it to the February 26th. I would recommend that we stay away from the special hearing we set on February 19th. I think we want to designate that time for those ordinance amendments. So looking at February 26th, which is here in Santa Barbara, if we could just get confirmation from the appellant. and the
Mr. Higgins is
applicant.
close to the mic, so.
Chair, I don't think that date in late February is going to work. If it's not my schedule, it's yours. I realize anything in the earlier part of March, the first 3 weeks of March, I think is going to do better. I wanted to make sure, though, and I'm going to do my homework as well as staff. And
We're just asking you for the
I know,
continuance
but I
date.
just,
No,
while
no,
you're
no, I'm
there-
not, no, sorry, Mr. Higgins, that's it, the date. So anytime in March is okay with you?
First 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilson, and the
So-
appellants?
Yeah, Madam Chair, the appellants, and looking at early part of March would be, I'd recommend March 5th. There's nothing on that item, but the 12th is in Santa Maria. So I'd recommend the 5th.
March 5th, we have an open slot. So does that work for the appellants? Okay,
Madam Chair, if we could just ask the appellant to come onto the mic and just confirm that. And then the
March
applicant,
5.
just say yes or no to March 5th.
I'll ask John.
March 5th is fine.
I'll have to check my calendar, but I believe that March 5th will work for me.
Okay. So that's your,
So my motion is to continue this matter to our agenda of March 5 here in Santa Barbara.
Second the motion.
okay. You want to do a roll call?
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed,
No.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Bradley.
No.
Motion passes 3-2.
Okay. I hope I still get a ride. Let's take a quick break to change out staff's presence. And by the way, thank you, Ms. Brown, for an incredible staff report. That was very good. Okay, we are reconvening the meeting of the Planning Commission of February 5th, 2025. Let's have our item 2 read into the record, Mr. Villalobos.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of the Planning and Development Department for the County Planning Commission to consider making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding adoption of emergency shelter ordinance amendments to comply with new state laws and implement Program 9 of Chapter 5 of the 2023-2031 Housing Element Update and Art Tours and Home Occupation Zoning Ordinance Amendments, case numbers 24 ORD 21, 22 and 31, and also determine that the ordinance amendments are exempt from provisions of CEQA pursuant to sections 15061B3 and 15165 of the state guidelines for implementation of CEQA.
Thank you, and we have no Brown Act or ex parte communications because this is a legislative item, so we go straight to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. Alex Tuttle with Long Range Planning, and we might try to keep this fairly brief today. So as you might recall from our hearing last week, where we presented the emergency shelters and the home occupations art studio ordinance package, the direction at the end of that meeting was to look to decouple those two ordinance amendments so that your commission could potentially take action on the art tours and home occupations ordinance amendment while continued deliberation and consideration of the emergency shelters. So that is what we have done. We provided a memo with attachments to your commission that you should have received yesterday that includes separate findings and CEQA exemption and the ordinance amendment for the art tours and home occupations. With regard to the emergency shelters, we had initially prepared to come to your commission today and provide some additional information and discuss some different range of alternatives that we could consider for moving that project along. However, we've determined that we need some additional time before we're prepared to do that. So our request to you today is to take action on the emergency, or take action on the art tours and home occupations, and then to continue the emergency shelter package for further discussion at the March 12th Planning Commission hearing. So I wasn't prepared or planning on providing a recap of the art tours and home occupation that was presented at the last meeting, but we are available for questions. And can certainly refresh your memory on any of that if you so choose. I also do have Sarah York Rubin here with the, what's your title?
Director of the Office of Arts and Culture, so the County Community Services Department.
Yes. And she is also very familiar with our tour concept and the history there, so is available for questions as well. So that concludes staff's presentation, and just as a reminder, when you're ready, your recommended action would be to make the required findings for approval of case number 24 ORD 31, which is the art tours and home occupations. Determine that ordinance is exempt from CEQA, adopt a resolution recommending board approval of that ordinance.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I think Commissioner Park and I might have the same thought.
All right, wow.
I'm trying to figure out what that would be like.
Telepathic.
Really?
I see
You may not want
fireworks.
to go there.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're
Let
thinking.
me retract that statement.
Really?
I do want to just refresh the commission's memory. Last hearing, I think Commissioner Park did step out prior to this presentation. So we'd look to Commissioner Park that either he watched that presentation or we do want to have a review of that. So Commissioner Park could participate. I know, Chair, you indicated that we wanted to have Commissioner Park participate in this hearing. So we may want to have a refresher from staff on the material presented. So if Commissioner Park has questions or wants to contribute that way, we can do that.
Okay, right, because art tour is really generated from the 3rd district. So I see another question from Mr. Martinez. So, Commissioner Martinez?
Oh, I thought we were going to go to staff, but since we're having that question, I think you're trying to resolve that question first with Commissioner Park before we go and ask county staff that. So I'll reserve my question.
Commissioner Park?
I did not watch the video of the remainder of the hearing. I did review the PowerPoint presentation, and I reviewed it twice, and I reviewed the staff report specifically on the art tours, and I even looked at the exhibits to look at the language. So I'm ready to roll, but if you think I need to be educated by a oral presentation of the staff report, what the heck?
Chair Bradley, Commissioners, Mr. Villalobos did pull up last week's presentation. I can certainly roll through that, but I'll leave that up to your commission as to whether you think that's necessary.
No, Chair and Commissioners, that was the statement we were looking for from Commissioner Park, that he's reviewed the material and he's prepared and ready to participate. So with that, we can proceed as the chair sees fit.
Okay. I just had one question. Can you go back to our summary action today? So these are all under the same ordinance number, but we just dropped out one of them, the emergency shelters. So it's, how?
Yeah, Chair Bradley, Commissioners. So there's three ordinances, 24 ORD 21 and 22. Those were the ordinances for the Land Use Development Code and the Coastal Zoning Ordinance for the specific to the emergency shelters. So 21 and 22. So we'd be continuing action on those two ordinances. And your action today would be specific to 24 ORD 31, which is the ordinance tied to art tours and home occupations.
Got it. Thank you. I didn't read number 4 carefully enough. So, okay. Well, with that, we are looking, really, do we want to deliberate further about this? Commissioner
No,
Park?
I wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm very familiar with the art tours. I must have gone for several years running. One of my favorite events because it allows community members to kind of mingle as they go from house to house with the artists. And there's a lot of artists, like 24. It's just a great community event. And I wondered why the heck it stopped, and now I understand. So I'm very much in favor of the concept. But I'm always concerned, okay, if we have this ordinance and it talks about tours, is it broader than just art tours? Can it go to something else? And then I got to think about what is that something else, and would there be a problem? And that's why I looked at the language of the ordinance in the exhibits today, but I kind of got lost in the changes on the home occupation thing, and didn't really see much about tours in the ordinance. And I thought, instead of me just looking at it over and over again, I would ask you. So that's what I'm asking you. What's the potential in this ordinance to go beyond art tours, and what are the examples of the kinds of things that it could do, if that is the case?
Commissioner Park, through the chair. So let me just pull up read the language of the code of the draft ordinance specific to the tours. And it was broadened to include art, garden, and architectural tours. Those were the types of tours that were conceived of. But it is specific. It's that tours organized by a civic, educational, or service institution or organization directly engaged in civic, charitable, or philanthropic efforts and involving community tours of individual properties. So that's sort of the definition. And then it speaks to commercial sales or transactions in residential zones are limited to properties with approved home occupations or operating under or qualifying as an exempt home occupation. Not more than 4 events, such events per year may be conducted by a single entity or on an individual lot to last no longer than 3 consecutive days. Admission is open to the general public with or without ticket sales. Not to exceed 300 attendees per day, and then any lot used for reception or gathering functions in support of the tour would be limited to non-residential zones. So that's kind of the scope in which these tour activities could occur.
So it is broader than art and architecture and what was the third one?
Garden
Garden.
tours.
And those are great examples, but the language is broader. So if I want to have tours on come look at my sheep or my gun safes or things that people might not like, then it includes that potentially. And doesn't it?
Well, if it was being organized by a civic, educational, or service institution or organization engaged in civic, charitable, or philanthropic efforts.
Yeah, I would suspect there will be other things that will find a home in this ordinance. San Ynez Valley, of course, is so equestrian oriented, and there'll be equestrian type activities. I'm sure we'll find that, or saddle collections and whatnot. I don't really have anything in mind that I think I would find negative. I just wanted to consider that, because if somebody can think of something they would find negative, now's the time to talk about it before we adopt an ordinance of general application based on, one particular use that most of us adore, that is the art tours. Thanks.
Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, I have some questions that, and I fully support art tours, especially garden tours. I've been on many garden tours, some art tours. I think they're a real asset. I would support them. But my questions are relevant to the language and the development standards. Okay. If we could go to attachment C1, page 2, development standards under D, it says, item C, the home occupation shall be conducted solely by the occupants of the dwelling located on the lot. No employees other than the dwelling occupants shall be permitted. Well, what if it's a little family business and they're going to have one of their, adult children come in and help them? Is that possible, or is that going to be eliminated by this? One question. But you also can have off-site employees or partners if they work remotely. So is it possible to have any other you're not running a big business, but if they have like 1 or 2 casual employees to come in to assist them, would that be possible, or would that be banned?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, so it looks like you're reading from an existing standard of the home occupations, which is not changing. But it does state the home occupation shall be conducted, as you indicated, solely by the occupants of a dwelling located on that lot. No employees other than the dwelling occupant shall be permitted for business purposes on the lot that contains the home occupation.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, it is, home occupations are really intended for the occupants of those homes, not to bring in outside employees that are working on
Okay,
site.
because in these standards, there's just home occupations other than cottage food operations and then cottage food operations. So this isn't referring just to art-related things. This is any sort of a home occupation.
The home occupation section is broad, so it could
Okay.
be someone who's
Hairdresser,
a
accountant,
CPA or
services.
yeah,
A land use planner.
Yeah.
I've got a home occupation.
could be a psychiatrist, family therapist, any of those who are just doing their work out of their home.
So it still does allow drop-in customers if you're an accountant, you're offering services, or a hairdresser, or those sorts of things.
Correct, yeah, there's a provision that no more than 5 customers, patients, clients, students, or other, think of like a music teacher, for example. I remember as a kid going to my piano teacher's house and taking music lessons.
Okay.
That didn't last very long, by the way.
So,
So it does allow for that to occur.
so those would still be permitted. Then going on to Section E, exceptions to permit requirements for home occupations. If you look at item A, they have 4 times a year where you can have over 25 customers in at a time. You see that?
Yes,
Now, that's in support of hosting the art tours where numbers of people could come in and actually buy items. Is that how that fits in?
that is correct. So you could be in a situation where you don't normally on a day-to-day basis have customers or clients coming, but up to 4 times a year, you could have those 24 customers coming. And it is envisioned that would potentially be occurring as part of like an art tour or
Okay.
something.
And I noticed
similar
also
situation.
it says if you have promotional like advertising materials for your home business, other than your business card or something, you can't put the address on there.
Correct.
So if you're having these garden tours and these 25 people are going to come to your home business, how do they know where it is?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, and perhaps Sarah could speak to this, but normally with these tours, you purchase your ticket, there's participating artists.
So the society that's
and
promoting
you
it.
get like a map of the different participating
So that's
artists.
allowed, so that fits, it's coordinated with this?
Yes.
Okay. Good news, I think that's all I have, yeah.
Okay, I think this is I have a question for the rest of the commission on the art tours specifically, that it's 300 people up to 4 times a year by the same sponsoring agency. Do I have that right? I'm on attachment C1, page 12. So again, this is hopping back over to Art Garden and architecture tourism. Like I said, I've been involved with the Pearl Chase Society, the Column Design Showcase Houses, Gardens of Paradise for Lotus Land, da-da-da. So I know how these things go. So in this provision, you're actually allowing it to be with what kind of permit? No permit?
It would be exempt, yeah,
Exempt.
no permit.
To have, the Pearl Chase Society could have 4 of these a year at 300 people per event. So that's quite a lot. And I really want to get Commissioner Parks' feedback on that. Does 4 a year per sponsoring agency seem a little flush, or do you think that's okay? Because what if you had 3 nonprofits in a really cool part of town and they're all going to do these things? Is that about right, do you think?
I think that's a good question. And I think that if there's such a flowering of activity here that the number of people touring around becomes noticeable and even burdensome to some, it won't come from like one organization like Pearl Chase doing it 4 times. It'll come from all sorts of others getting involved. Oh, well, okay, we're going to have crafts. We're going to have jewelry making. We'll have quilts. We'll have, and so you'll get maybe a whole bunch of uses that want to do things. And I don't really have a feeling about what's too much there. As a practical matter, this will, of course, go to the board to make the legislative enactments. I know this is a very popular program in the 3rd District, the 3rd District Supervisorial Office. So instead of me directly answering your question, it's something I would say, staff has undoubtedly had some input. I would vote to approve it, punt, so to speak, and let Supervisor Hartman adjust that if she felt that it was appropriate.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was your name? Because maybe you have some feedback about that too, in terms of the organic demand for these kinds of things around the county, and what it feels like in San Ynez might be different than in Mission Canyon or in Summerlin. So
Thank you, Madam Chair.
maybe you can give us some feedback.
And my name is Sarah York-Rubin. I think something we've noticed, with the creative community, is that few people, or community in general, have an understanding of the distinction between incorporated and unincorporated areas. And I also think that few are aware of conditional use permitting, and a lot of the garden tours that you would encounter are already happening, really. Like most of what you might anticipate is what's currently in process. I think the San Ynez Valley Art Tour is the one that was in process that collapsed when I think the LUDC was questioned. But it should be a similar, my thought would be, volume as it is currently. I would hope for more, but I think you kind of see in your neighborhood about what happens.
Okay. Commissioner Park?
I just like to add a personal observation on the art tour. I never found parking to be an issue when I would go on the tour. I never noticed anything about parking. And typically, when I would go see an artist, I was usually the only one there with my wife, and we'd talk at length and do all sorts of things. And I mean, I just loved doing it. And then occasionally somebody might come in, but it didn't seem like there were crowds. Although the overall crowd that got the chance to go to all the things, they sort of disperse and distribute, and it works really well. And I've been here in the city on architectural tours. I'm sure you've been several, and they seem to be more populated at a given house, but I never saw anything where it was throngs and difficulty parking. So I would suspect we won't have those numbers issues. And then I'll reiterate that I think it's so great for people to have an interest in art to see each other and speak with the artists and mingle around in this sort of thing, that it's just a real addition to how we promote community. I mean, it's really important. So there you go.
Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, just kind of, I'm almost reminded of some of the discussions we had, particularly from the Santa Ynez Valley, from their residents, when we were contemplating and working through the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, as well as, some comments from neighbors when we were looking at certain properties that were planning equestrian events. I just wonder if staff has entertained at all making a suggestion to promoters of these events that they would consider the possibility of offering trolley service or some sort of bus service to participants, so that in parking sensitive areas, or in for participants who are concerned with greenhouse gases of a bunch of cars making a bunch of short trips, they might like to explore riding on a nice trolley or something like that would accommodate larger groups of people rather than individual cars.
I mean, if it's exempt, there would be no touch by staff as proposed right now. My experience, like Commissioner Parks, the things in the city of Santa Barbara, whether it's an art tour or Pearl Chase Society, architecture tour, or I've lately been involved with Lotus Sun on garden tours around the county, and those are all on residential sites. So this exemption would make sense if we do a garden tour up in Santa Ynez, a winery tour, garden tour. The ones in a commercial zone, who cares? It's a commercial zone, you can do anything. The ones that are in more densified areas where maybe parking is an issue, I think that the sponsor for these events knows that they have to make it a good visitor experience. And so if it's going to be like Pearl Chase Society, when they have the downtown historic tourism, which they've given up because it's such a complicated thing for the nonprofit to do, they were walking tours, and then they would actually find satellite parking lots at churches or whatever and actually make it happen, because it has to be successful for them too, because you want your patron to come back. So I'm not really worried about it, and I love the idea of shuttles, but I think the onus is on the operator to make it successful, and that's one of those elements. So, well, I really appreciate the feedback and the chance to talk about it a little bit more in terms of the intensity in the different area. So I don't have any other questions. Commissioner Park?
I'd just like to muse about one little thing that kind of relates to what you just talked about. Some of you might remember when the Ag Enterprise Ordinance went up to the board, and it had exemptions for various activities, athletic events and things like that, that some members of the board asked for, and I think they got it in there, at least some sort of registration program, so that P&D, so the county in general, would know how many of these events are occurring and where are they, and so on and so forth. And then if you have abuses or complaints, you're better able to respond to it. And that's something that I had discussed long ago with Director Plowman. Should we have no exemptions and have everything require a zoning clearance, because then at least we'd be able to keep track of it. But then zoning clearances do take staff time, and it might be that with zoning clearances, you have to charge the applicant, and it gets kind of involved. And so I don't know, if there was something where someone could keep track of this as registry of some sort, but without all the formality and expense of a zoning clearance, I'd be open to that. But that may happen kind of already with the Arts Commission. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have your surname, and I like to use surname, but call you Sarah. You can call me John. But I would bet you're familiar with most of these art tours, and if somebody simply wanted to know, okay, how many of these are we having? They just call you up, and they'd call up somebody leading the architects and other things, and get a pretty good feeling without going through the formality of zoning clearances.
Right. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Does your office already inventory that?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner John Park. We do regularly interact with, I think, members of the public or community groups who just reach out to check in or ask for advice. Or we have a calendar, we have a community calendar that people promote the events on. And so we get a really great view there. And often they'll reach out kind of for other suggestions. So I think that process, I think, covers a great swath of it.
Great. Could I make a request? Can you just give us your website, and planning staff can send it to us so we understand that resource as it goes up to the board? That would be helpful.
I would love that.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. I'm not seeing anything. So do we want to turn to our beautiful slide with the recommendations?
Before we go there, we do actually have one
we have
speaker
public
online.
comment.
Yeah.
Yes. What am I thinking? I'm sorry. I'm just on a roll. Let's open the public comment. And who do we have online?
Our first speaker will be Betsy Newman.
Betsy Newman.
Hello. I am Betsy Newman, as I'm introduced, and I am a county arts commissioner from District 1. And I want to commend the Planning Commission for updating some of the outdated things that were part of the housing occupancy. I don't know why it was strange that artists, one vocation that was subject to permitting, so I'm glad that that's going to go away. As we know, the majority of artists use a room in their home for their studio space. They usually aren't in the backyard or in the garage for their artwork. Also think that artists, such as people that work in textiles or jewelry, they have a very small material impact on the vocations, like instead of carpenters or welders. So, and they don't have regular clients like carpenters might or welders. So that's also a positive about artists working out of their home. We feel it's important to make the differentiation between working privately in your home and art galleries. So the art studio is a private space in the home that the artist is actually using to make art, while the galleries are the retail spaces for the artist to sell their art. So we're quite pleased that you're updating the occupancy code. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else online, or is it?
No additional speakers.
Okay. So with that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation and motion. Don't all jump in.
Well, I'll make the motion. I would make the motion that we accept the recommendations of staff, make the required findings for approval of case number 240 ORD 00031, and determine 24 ORD 0031 is exempt from CEQA. Adopt a resolution recommending board approval of case number 24 ORD 00031, and continue 24 ORD 00021 and 24 ORD 00022 to March 12th, 2025 for further discussion and presentation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Yes?
Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
And Chair Bridley.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of our meeting, and we can adjourn to February 12th.
Yes,
Right?
indeed. I just did last